So if I'm thinking about the novice athlete, and this can also be a little bit of a kind of thinking about like a return to play sort of position too, I got to do basic strength training, right? So that's just me front squatting. I think I really just wanted to show that I'm strong. And then centric focus plyos. So this is just a drop catch to dumbbells, but it's basically going to be like your snap down variations, things where we're focusing on producing force fast eccentrically and being able to produce as much force as possible eccentrically, okay? Low intensity rhythmic plyos. Shout out to our old space in Newton, all right? Had to just throw that in there. But this is just reactive, working on sequencing, working on coordination. This is just rhythmic building. That's where we're kind of building the capacity with these kind of things. Yielding plyos. Working on the landing, working on dissipating forces, working on being able to actually get those tissues to stretch, loading the right joints. All right, and then when I'm thinking about programming plyometrics from like a periodization standpoint, a long-term development standpoint, a lot of what we're going to do is going to be general physical qualities, right? We're trying to build the capacity of the tissues. We're trying to build stiffness in the tendons, right? We're trying to build these physiological qualities. As we get more sport specific, we want those plyometrics to be more specific to the positions that they're going to be in their sport, the angles of force that are going to happen in their sport, the impulse, and the capacity, right? So I think that's really is where people struggle from a sports performance perspective, and getting people in what you were talking about, Dave, of that actually getting them into, preparing for their sport from maybe either a return to play or just they're a novice athlete. And we've built these foundations. Now, how do I get them to actually transfer over? All right. And the reality is I don't need to get crazy with my variation. I don't need to make it look cool. I just need to get closer and closer to mimic those positions. So I'm going to show you what I mean with this video a little bit. This is kind of a post I made on Instagram a couple weeks ago. You'll see Jerry doing these bounds that are pretty intensive. You can make them more intense, and if we look at the joint angles here, in a second, I'm going to freeze frame. So that's going to be a linear cut, something you're going to see on every field sport, and it's mimicking the same joint angle that we're creating, the same impulse qualities in that 45-degree bound. Now we got a lateral rebound jump. Jared's not quite as intense here, but it's intensive-ish. And then we're looking at a shuffle, right? You're going to see this every game, every sport, pretty much field court sport. And again, the angles, we're mimicking these angles, and we're mimicking the amount of force created. I think that's all I got there, yep. So the biggest thing with this is when I'm thinking about the actual goal of plyometrics, it's to overload those positions, right? That's why I'm doing it. I want to get them to a point where I'm overloading those positions, the angles, the same angles, and the impulse demands of the sport, so that when they get to the sport, they're good. They can meet what they need from when things start to get fast and the demand is higher to produce force fast. All right? Yeah, what do you got?
Would you expect with that last one, like the lateral jumps to be harder than the lateral shuffle? The lateral shuffles be harder? Is that like progression on each other? Completely different?
Completely different. And Dan's going to go into change direction in a minute, and he'll talk through the progressions with that. The point I'm trying to make is that when I'm thinking about what is transfer to sport, I have to think about, and this is where it's going to be, Dan's going to show you all of these, what are the skills that we need to be good at agility and change of direction, right? And when I'm thinking about plyometrics, outside of we got volleyball and basketball where maybe the actual jumping ability is important, and that's something we're going to work on a little bit more specifically, ultimately, its value is mimicking the positions and creating the force demands that are similar to change of direction, right? It's really agility and change of direction that we're trying to overload these tissues and those positions so that we can have high performance. All right, so I'm not saying that those are, I'm going right from the lateral bound to the shuffle and that those have the same progression list. I'm just saying when I'm thinking about what's actually going to transfer, I got to look at what movements are being done in the sport, in their specific sport. Every sport's going to be a little different. And then I want to have the plyometrics that I'm doing mimic that from a joint angle perspective, a ground contact time perspective, impulse demands, right? Because I could do a lot of different, like that's the thing that can be complicated about plyometrics, and that's why we're starting out with it, is that there's a lot of variations. I just showed you 3 different ways I can do one exercise, and there's a million exercises, right? So sometimes it can be hard to decide. We can get really bogged down by all of the options that I have, right? So if I'm gonna make it simple, I gotta think about what are the actual movements that they're gonna do in their sport, what are the ground contact times like, how long are they gonna have on the ground, what are the impulse demands, what are the positions, and what are the angles. And then I wanna mimic those as close as possible. And you're probably not gonna be able to do that right off the bat, because as I said, you watch my little single leg hop, I can't even create stiffness in my ankle and foot enough to be elastic there. So I'm gonna have to build that, right? And the question is, how do I build that? And we have to go through the progressions. I talked about the big picture program considerations. I wanna keep those in mind. But if I'm thinking about like a novice person, we'll go back here. These are the things I'm gonna focus on the most. I'm not gonna do a whole lot of intensive stuff off the bat. I need to build to that. Because you saw, if you tried to do single leg, really intensive stuff with me, repetitive hops, it's probably not gonna go well. I'm probably gonna have some foot issues, right? And I'm gonna be fine from a force production perspective with my quads and my hips, right? And I'll be able to do a lot of things pretty intense, but it's not gonna go well for my foot, and I'm probably not getting what I want out of it, because for me, performance is gonna be on the elastic side of things probably, right? That's probably gonna help me a lot more. So building these qualities are the things we wanna focus on, these yielding plyos, low intensity, and then I'm gonna build into more intensive stuff. But as I said, so say you get an athlete tomorrow, comes in your facility, and they're already kind of high level, right? We're not talking about an office athlete. That's where I wanna classify them. That's where I'm gonna put them a little bit, where are they on the spectrum of things? Are they more of this force dominant person? Are they more elastic reactive?